Fernand Joseph Desire Contandin opened his eyes for the first time on May 8, 1903 at 4 o'clock in the morning in a narrow third-floor flat at 72 Boulevard Bailey in Marseille, above the pharmacy where his father Denis worked as a cashier and bookkeeper. The newborn's cry was so loud that the pharmacist's wife on the floor below dropped a bottle of tincture of iodine and swore the child had the lungs of a town crier. Desiree Bedouin, 26 years old, exhausted and radiant, looked at the baby's long face and already prominent teeth and laughed through her tears. "He looks like a horse that has just won the Grand Prix." The midwife, wiping her hands, declared, "That one will eat the stage with all his teeth." Denis, who sang under the name signed in the cafes concerts of the Vieux-Port, leaned over the cradle and whispered, "You'll make people laugh, my son, because life is too sad to be taken seriously." The neighbors, awakened by the commotion, sent up a bottle of pastis and a plate of panaces. Marseille had just acquired its greatest treasure without knowing it yet. The first years were pure Provençal poverty, the kind that sings even when the pot is empty. The family moved 8 times in 10 years. Boulevard Bailey, then Rue Saint-Savornin, then a damp ground floor in La Capelette where the tram rattled the windows every quarter of an hour. Denis earned barely enough to buy bread and anisette. Desiree sewed shirts at night by the light of an oil lamp. Fernand grew up among the smells of tar, sea salt, fish soup, and the voices of street vendors. At 5 he already knew all the songs of Mayol and Drainham by heart. At 6 he climbed on café tables in the Quartier de l'Opéra to imitate Paulin's Jewish accent and collect a few sous in a felt hat. At 7 he made his professional debut at the Alcazar on the Cannebière singing La Paimpolaise, dressed in a sailor suit 2 sizes too big. The audience threw flowers and coins, and the director slipped 10 francs into his hand, saying, "Come back when you're taller, kid." He came back the following Sunday, still the same height but with twice the cheek. School interested him only as a place to make the class laugh. The brothers at St. Joseph on the Rue Paradis quickly despaired. The child spent lessons drawing caricatures of the teachers and imitating their voices so perfectly that the whole courtyard burst out laughing at recreation. At 12 he left school for good. World War I had begun. Denis was mobilized as a stretcher-bearer, Desiree fell ill, and Fernand became the family's man. He worked as an errand boy for a grocer, then as an apprentice in a soap factory on the Rue de la République where the vats of olive oil stank and burned the skin. At 14 he became a docker at the Joliette Basins, loading 100-kilo sacks of wheat under a sun that cracked the lips. The older dockers called him Canasson because of his long teeth and endless legs, but when he sang frou-frou or la machichai between 2 handlings, even the toughest stopped to listen. He earned 30 sous a day, brought home 25, and kept 5 to go to the cinema Path on Saturday nights where he discovered Chaplin, Max Linder, and Fatty Arbuckle. He came out convinced that laughter was the only honest trade in the world. In 1919, at 16, he decided to become an artist for good. He started again at the small music halls of Marseille, the Châtelet, the Varietés, the Palais de Cristal, the El Dorado. He invented characters with resounding names: Barnaby, Ignace, Felician, always dressed in a too large jacket, a battered felt hat pulled down over one eye, and a tie knotted like a hangman's rope. His trademark became the gigantic smile that showed 32 teeth at once and made the room explode. In 1921 he created Ignace at the Alcazar, a naive peasant who discovers Marseille and its women. The song Ignace, Tu vas à la Péchi aux moles, became the anthem of every wedding in Provence for 20 years. The same year he met Henriette Mance, a quiet brunette with soft eyes who worked as a seamstress in a workshop on the Rue Saint-Ferréol. She had seen him on stage and found him too ugly to be true, too funny to forget. He courted her the old-fashioned way: bouquets of mimosa, boat rides on the Vieux-Port, serenades under the window until the neighbors threatened to throw buckets of water. They married on November 24, 1925 in the Church of St. Joseph. Henriette wore a simple white dress and Fernand a morning coat borrowed from a friend because he had spent all his money on the wedding banquet. Their first daughter Josette was born 10 months later. Janine in 1930, Frank in 1935. Fernandel swore he would never again let his children know the hunger he had known. Cinema arrived in 1930 like a thunderbolt. Marcel Pagnol, already famous for Marius, saw him one evening at the Alcazar and said to his assistant, "There's my Amédée." He summoned Fernandel to the Hotel Noailles, made him read 3 lines, and hired him on the spot for the film version of Topaz. The screen test lasted 30 seconds. Fernandel entered the frame, smiled, and the cameraman dropped his cigarette. Pagnol later said, "I didn't discover him. He discovered himself the instant the camera fell in love with him." The film came out in 1931 and was an immediate triumph. Overnight, Fernandel became the most popular actor in France. He signed with Paramount for 3 films a year and bought his first car, a magnificent Delage cabriolet in which he paraded along the Cannebière with Henriette and the children, horn blaring, while the crowd shouted, "Fernand! Fernand!" The 1930s were a golden whirlwind. He shot up to 12 films a year: Le Rosier de Madame Husson, Angélie, Regain, Un carnet de bal, La fille du puisadier. Critics accused him of overexposure. He replied, "The public wants me, I give them me." He worked with the greatest: Julien de Vivier, Christian Jacques, Sacha Guitry, Maurice Turner. On the set of Angélie in 1934, he spent 3 weeks in the Camargue mud with Jeanette Leclerc and Aurène de Matzes, catching cold after cold but refusing to complain because the film must be beautiful. Off the set, he bought the Villa La Soupe au Pistou in Carré-le-Rouet, a large white house overlooking the sea where he raised chickens, played pétanque with the fishermen, and received all of French cinema. Raymond came to eat bouillabaisse and argue about everything. Jean Gabin came to lose at Bellotti. Tino Rossi came to sing until dawn. Fernandel welcomed everyone with the same cry, come in, there's always room for one more." World War II darkened everything. After the defeat of 1940, Fernandel refused German offers to shoot in Berlin. He took refuge in Marseille, performed in theaters in the Free Zone, and shot only films authorized by Vichy. Simplet, La fille du puisadier, Pagnol's patriotic plea, Les goûts au paradis. Rumors circulated that he hid Jewish friends in the cellar of La Soupe au Pistou. Others said he simply kept quiet and waited. In 1942, he agreed to make Le Camembert Volant with Continental, the German production company, because the money allowed him to feed his family and dozens of neighbors who had nothing left. He hated himself for it, but never spoke of it again. Liberation restored light. In 1945, he resumed with Pagnol, Nice. Then in 1951, a new version of Topaz in color where he played both the timid professor and the corrupt minister. But the real apotheosis came in 1951, when Julien de Vivier offered him the role of Don Camillo. The shooting took place in Bracello, a small village in Emilia-Romagna, under a murderous sun. Fernandel, 48 years old, donned the cassock, put on 20 kilos for the role, and learned to box like a peasant priest. Opposite Gino Cerva's Pepone, he improvised half the dialogue in a delicious Italian Marseille accent. The film was released in 1952 and became the biggest French success of all time until La Grande Vadrouille. 4 sequels followed: Le Retour de Don Camillo, 1953, La Grande Bagarre, 1955, Don Camillo Monseigneur, 1961, Don Camillo en Russie, 1965. Fernandel toured the world in a cassock. Moscow, New York, Tokyo, Buenos Aires. In Italy, children called him Don Camillo in the street. In France, priests invited him to preach the sermon on Sunday, because you do it better than us. The 1950s and 1960s were the years of absolute kingship. He shot more than 100 films: L'ennemi public numéro 1, Ali Baba et les 40 voleurs, La Vache et le prisonnier, where he crossed Germany with a cow named Marguerite, Le Voyage du Père, L'Age Ingrat, Heroica comme Ulysses. He recorded hundreds of songs: Félicie aussi, La Caissière du Grand Café, Avec l'accent. He filled the Bobino, the Olympia, the Alhambra. He bought a second property in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, a moss surrounded by olive trees where he retreated every summer to play boules barefoot and drink rose with the farmers. He refused all honors, Legion of Honor, invitations to the Élysée, film festivals. He said, "I'm a clown, not a monument." But the body began to betray him. Years of smoking 3 packets of Gauloise a day, pastis at every meal, and the old doctor's injury in his back had left traces. In 1968, during the shooting of Hero comme Ulysses, he began to cough blood. The doctors diagnosed lung cancer already metastasized to the bones. He was 65. He refused to stop. He finished the film, then L'Homme à la Buick, then a television special titled Fernandel Forever where he sang his old hits seated because he could no longer stand for long. Friends who visited him at the American hospital in Neuilly saw a skeleton with the same sparkling eyes and the same dazzling smile. He joked until the end, "I've made people laugh all my life. I'm not going to make them cry now." On February 26, 1971, at 4:15 in the morning, he died in his bed at Avenue Victor Hugo in Paris, Henriette holding his hand. He was 67 years old. His last words were, "Don't cry, Riquette. We laughed a lot all the same." France stopped. The funeral was held in Marseille at the Church of St. Joseph. More than 100,000 people lined the Cannebière in silence. The coffin, covered with white roses, was carried by dockers from the Joliette who had known him when he was still Canasson. Pagnol, too ill to travel, sent a wreath with a single sentence, "To my beloved big idiot." The burial took place in the cemetery of Passy in Paris, but Marseille erected a statue of him on the viewport where gulls still perch on his bronze hat. He left 143 films, thousands of songs, 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and a smile that defined an entire era of French joy. His villa in Carré-le-Rouet became a museum. The Moss of Saint Remy still belongs to the family. Every Easter the Don Camillo films return to television, and families still laugh at the same jokes. In Marseille old men playing pétanque still quote his lines word for word, and when a child asks why everyone loved him so much, the answer is always the same. Because for 40 years, no matter how hard life was, Fernandel made the whole country smile with him, and that smile has never gone out.